Lecture 5, Buddhism and Social Justice. Buddhism has from day one been a social justice movement. The Buddha shocked the religious thinkers of his time by inviting followers from all castes, including the untouchables, and his teachings flew in the face of entrenched caste restrictions and religious hierarchies. In ancient Indian culture, status and wealth was thought to have some relationship to moral worth, that they were the fruits of karma. This idea is found in contemporary culture as well. The Buddha, however, insisted that anyone, no matter what their social position, was worthy and fully capable of realizing the truth and even able to reach nirvana. Perhaps no other act of social justice overshadows Buddha's unprecedented step of accepting women into his monastic order. In the patriarchal society of 5th century before Christ in India, as in many other places, women were considered little more than the property of men. While the first Buddhist nuns never became the exact equals of monks, they were highly respected and fully included in monastic community life. The social justice problems that the Buddha addressed in his day are still issues today. Elitism, racism, sexism, and other forms of oppression are as relevant now as they were then. As a movement, engaged Buddhism is really continuing the work that the Buddha started 25 centuries ago. For the last century, the continuation of that work has been on a remarkable surge in America. Buddhism has gone from being the marginal religion of Asian immigrants on the West Coast, plus a few eccentric Europeans and Americans who explored theosophy, to a religion practiced by millions of Americans throughout the country and known, at least on some level, to millions more through books, magazines, television, and movies. American Buddhism as we know it today is an outgrowth of two simultaneous cultural changes: Americans new to Buddhism or Buddhists new to America. Buddhism in America has been a profoundly democratizing influence on Buddhism in general. It has liberalized patterns of authority in Buddhist sanghas and in the relationship between monastic and lay communities. This liberalization can also be witnessed in changing gender roles, especially the prominence of women in American Buddhism. Finally, it can be seen in the manner in which individuals pursuing a non-traditional lifestyle, particularly with regard to sexual preferences, are finding a meaningful role in American Buddhist communities. The curious amalgamation of traditional Buddhist ideas and certain upper-middle-class American values, above all individualism, freedom of choice, and personal fulfillment, has resulted in what some have described as elite Buddhism. These non-negotiable cultural demands have reshaped Buddhist ideas and practices in significant ways, yielding a genuinely new Buddhist adaptation to affluent American culture. But Buddhism, with its emphasis on mindfulness and self-restraint, calls for a personal revolution both from within and in our relationship with the world around us, especially in the realm of political power and political economy. Non-reflection on the nature of political power and political decisions that everyone is involved in leaves one a passive supporter of the status quo, and political elites have come to depend on this lack of opposition to their inappropriate exercises of power. An understanding of the inherent oneness of all things and morality, as described in the Eightfold Path, requires the Buddhist practitioner to also be somewhat of a political revolutionary. The essential Buddhist understanding that makes social justice a priority is that the individual self is defined to include all other selves through the theory of mutual interpenetration, or dependent co-origination. The inclination towards social justice activism is enhanced by several perspectives shared by contemporary Euro-American Buddhists. For example, the modern American Buddhist does not generally believe in heaven as an alternative venue for human life. They are committed to living entirely in the present, or the here and now. They feel a personal connection to all living things, and they have a cyclical rather than millenarian view of life. The Dalai Lama has taught that the purpose of taking birth in this world is to help others. If we cannot do that, at least we should do no harm to other living beings. American Buddhists need to keep in mind the exercise of charity is what gives their adapted Buddhism a truly Buddhist character. It needs to flow from genuine generosity and not tied to abstractions like the eradication of poverty. Nor should this compassionate action be connected to feelings of pity that denies the fundamental equality of the other person and our intimate connection with them. An attitude of discrimination should be avoided, even though it is clear that particular attention should be paid to the suffering of the very poor and the helpless. To pit one group against another, or to favor one constituency more than others, is socially divisive, politically unjust, and goes against the very essence of Buddhism. Of course, the very purpose of Buddhism is the enlightenment of individuals. A person cannot achieve enlightenment if they are constantly subject to poverty or oppression. The Buddha achieved enlightenment only after he had rejected the path of the half-starved ascetic. Therefore, it is a concern to Buddhists that people have their basic needs met in order that they may achieve liberation from suffering. Buddhism is all about letting go of cravings and desires, and the ethical spirit of Buddhism ensures that the attachment to life is circumscribed by ideas of fairness, sharing of wealth, and protection of all living things. In a Buddhist society, individuals with power or wealth are not permitted to exploit others, either in the obvious ways or in more hidden forms of exploitation. Let's highlight a fundamental Buddhist principle that is generally understood as important for personal practice, but the social implications of it are equally significant. The relationship between dukkha, usually translated as suffering or unsatisfaction, and our sense of self. It is not enough to say that dukkha is caused by craving. Rather, Buddhism relates our dukkha specifically to an erroneous sense of self. In other words, our inability to live happily is strongly connected to our deluded sense of self, and the duality of self and other, since the delusion of a separate self is also the delusion of a separate, objective world. Last month, in May of 2008, 5,000 representatives from 90 countries met at the 5th International Buddhist Conference in Hanoi. Their declaration made special reference to protecting the environment and the overexploitation of natural resources, especially at a time of climate change, the promotion of world peace through mutual trust and respect, preventing conflict through disarmament and banning tests on nuclear weapons, and acknowledging the social and economic development cannot be secured without peace and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. I share the belief that with heartfelt realization of our interconnection to one another and the earth, actions generated from this understanding will be guided by generosity, compassion, wisdom, and justice for all. Thanks.